G'day and welcome, patrons. This is Adam from Mad Micro RC Mods doing the A4 build video. It's in two parts. The first part's mainly the airframe and the second one's mainly the fit out. This video is more of a explanation on how to build with Depron foam and micro IC, and in this video I use Electrico equipment, but you are not limited to the Depron foam size, thickness you see, or even the equipment that I use. Use your imagination a little bit and you can have a great deal of fun in micro IC if you're keen. And you know, a lot of this is self-explanatory really. I took an A4 paper plane, I stuck it down to a piece of Depron foam so it wouldn't move around. Most of your airframes, if you're doing them and you're building continuously different ones and modifying them, it pays to do this. Make a pattern of it, like I did with this paper plane, and just mark it out. Always do your centerline if you can. A little bit I did at the end there. And always define your centerline. Your centerline's like your datum for the rest of the plane. Planes work best when they're balanced or exactly the same on each sides. Having a centerline to help do that is pretty important in most builds. Then basically you just start cutting out. That's the easy part. Always use a plastic or a metal ruler, not a wooden ruler, and use a hard plastic, not a soft one, with a really good edge to it, a large edge. Work slowly. Don't ever cut quickly with a blade. You make a mistake cutting slowly and cut your finger. It's only a little accident and a band-aid. You cut quickly and make a mistake, you may be going to hospital for stitches. These knives are sharp. So just take it really slow. And yeah, cut out the shape. And you may have to just trim a little bit here and there like I did on that one. Okay, the next bit you see me doing is cutting away the top part of the A4 paper plane. I needed to make a KF airfoil or a pattern for a KF airfoil that would fit the plane, so I just chopped the front section away from the plane and used that as a pattern to basically repeat the first process to make this second part. And then basically you'll see me glue the KF airfoil top section on top of the original air body. I'll go into KF airfoils and wings and lift and things like that later down the track. But basically, building planes like this with KF airfoils, if you get them right, makes them quite controllable, easy to build and easy to fly. Especially in a delta type plane, which is a triangular base or like a stealth type shape. Stealth jet, I should say. And I should quickly say that an A4 paper plane in Depron foam for your first micro RC build is probably not a great idea. This one flew, but it was a real handful, and a few things I did during the build that I probably shouldn't have done, as far as too much carbon fibre rods and stuff as well. But yeah, I'm coming up with PDFs and other builds which I've done previously that were very easy to do, can be built in one night, and you get a quite astounding result as far as flyability and what you can do with them in the air and how stable they are. So they'll be sort of Delta style jets as well at first, but there's also a glider on the way. So if you like micro RC and such, yeah, please stay tuned, and I'll probably go into a few different styles of builds along the way as well. Now, to line up your wings and things like that, I always do it this way, where I sort of pin it down, line it up, and I put a pin right through to the board. And then what I do after that is you can swivel it out of the way, put the glue pretty much where you need it, as you can see, right up under the nose and everywhere like that, and just swivel it back and put it down, and that's it. You can use a kicker if you want to set it off, but when I do body sections like this, it takes like I think 8 to 15 minutes maximum, so I'll just chuck a book on it and come back. It's no big deal to wait that little bit for that one part. Everything else you can very much glue and set on the spot. Now, what I'm doing now is just trimming off a little bit from the underside. What I'm doing is cutting off some of the excess KF airfoil that overlapped, because I did cut a little bit off the airframe, so now I have to cut the same little bit off the KF airfoil. Okay, the next thing you have to do is define the leading edge. With this plane I went for sort of a really mild knife edge, and the way I do this is I tend to get a texture, a black or a really bright colour, and I mark or paint that square leading edge. at the moment, which, square leading edges work, but depends what you want to do. This one I went for a knife edge, but you could have gone for a rounded edge instead. And then next thing I did was I mark lines back from the leading edge about 5mm. I also marked out where the propeller is going to go. And I've also cut out the rib section, which I copied off the A4 paper plane. And there's a little tail section which I've also cut away. You have to cut an angle on that so that it works as a hinge, which I'll go into more detail in the next build. Okay, the next thing I did, which I don't normally do, is I cut the little wing tips off. Now I used a piece of foam there to fill in the KF airfoil gap so the rule is nice and flat, and I cut these pieces off to reattach later. Normally I do a different technique to this, but this plane I had to for some stupid reason. It's the other way I do it's normally a lot easier, but anyway. And that's basically all the plane sections that I've prepared. Just laid out just to make sure I've got everything there ready to go. The next thing I did is I marked out two lines 2mm apart, but on either side of the center line, or the datum line. I have to cut out halfway through the plane, so I'm only cutting halfway through the material at the moment, not all the way through, just to make a slot that runs all the way down the plane body so I can install that center rib, the bit you normally hang on to and throw with. Now, whenever I have to cut out parts that are halfway through the plane body, I normally do extra cuts. I'll cut an extra line, or I'll cut it to little segments, or you can get in with some tweezers and just pull out the little pieces. As the glue sets as a crystalline, when you're using CA foam safe glue, it's a good way to get the pieces out without damaging the body or damaging the section you want to glue back onto. So yeah, that's basically it, and then the center rib fits. But I don't quite put it on yet. I decided it's better if your plane body is still very flat when you're doing your leading edge, which is what I start doing now. Now I just rough out the leading edge by pretty much just cutting 45 degrees with a really sharp hobby knife. As you can see, my hand's way back and I'm sliding the plane past the body very carefully. So then after roughing out that edge and then cleaning up a little bit, what I do is I put the leading edge right up against the edge of a working area so that when you're sliding the sandpaper and back like that, your first finger can actually feel the edge of the bench or the edge of what the plane's against, and it helps maintain a really good even level of what you've sanded down to, and also a very straight sanded line. And also that 5mm mark I made, you use that as a reference point as where to stop when you're sanding. And also that bit that you painted black, you can see when you've gone halfway down and you can stop there as well. It's an easy way to help you define a really nice sort of, I'd say that's a knife edge, but I didn't make it as sharp as you can if you're doing really high speed stuff. That wasn't the actual intention of this one. And yeah, you've got to work fast to do it quickly, or to speed up the footage. Okay, this next section, all I'm really doing is adding glue so that I can install the center rib. Oh, tricked you. What I did is most of these planes you tend to crash out of the ground nose first, so I always tend to put a bit of a carbon rod in the nose section. Just means you'll get, I don't know, twice or three times the crashes out of it before the nose starts to bend up. Now, leading edges I always tend to tape up, and I always tend to use this kind of tape called invisible tape, which is after you put it down, it tends to disappear. So it's a kind of office tape. It actually works a bit better. It holds a bit better. It's not as plastic and teary as the other stuff. It's more of a plasticky base, or a soft plastic, and doesn't tend to crack in that unless you actually cut it first, like the clear stuff. And yeah, always use this. I've tried other stuff. It always works the best. It just means that your leading edges get protected because it's foam. And you've opened it up as well a little bit with sanding, and if you go banging and crashing it into things, it'll get dinged up, which will affect the flight. By doing this, it can get beaten up quite a bit, and it won't get damaged too badly, and it won't affect the flight. And you can also, if it gets really badly beaten, you can rip it back out with your fingers and put more tape back on it again. Depron foam, or this building material, can be quite strong if you laminate pieces together, apply carbon rods, or other materials like tape on leading edges. Now, in this section, I'm pretty much just applying glue and then gluing that center rib down. As you can see, the center rib needs a piece cut out for the propeller to fit, if my hand gets out of the way. And when I do things like this, I always do it on a flat surface, and I have leveling blocks. Just 2 bits of wood will do. 2 good books might also suffice. But basically, you glue it in place and then you just jam stuff up against it and have a look along it to make sure that it's perfectly straight up and down. And also pins, if necessary, you can do that to bend it back or to fix it back in place. Because sometimes Depron foam may have a slight bend in it, and you can glue the bend out of it basically. Now, yeah, I still have to cut out that little section for the propeller. The next thing I think you see me do is go overboard with carbon rods. The thickness of Depron foam I used with this build and the amount of foam material there was meant that I didn't really need to add as many carbon rods as I did. I could have used none in the center of that plane, or just one instead of one on each side as I did. Now I just stacked up blocks here so I could lean that edge up without damaging the airframe, just to take that little section out. And also sand the intake and outtake section or material around the propeller hole. Now the next thing I do, which I filmed really badly, is I just cut out a size for the motor to fit. I used an 8.5 by 20 cordless brush motor in this plane, so I cut out a slot around that size. And what I tend to do is cut a little grid pattern in it so that I can get in with tweezers and pull that material off, because you're only cutting halfway through it, it's being glued. And what you find is by doing it that way, you end up with a perfectly clean hold and you don't damage the material underneath. Now, that's the end of part 1. Part 2 will be the fit out of the equipment, motor actuators and receiver, and also the connecting rods. I hope to see you in the next video. Adam out.